me, Rebecca. We do have a special guest of a little Brucey cat here on my feet, but he's gone a little bit camera shy and he's just sat down just slightly out of shot on my toe, so you might get a little sneak peek of him in a bit. We are on part 3 of Temple by Matthew Reilly. So hopefully you have enjoyed the first 2 parts. They are available on Twitch and YouTube if you want to go back and listen to those before, if you're new here. Yeah, a little quick recap of the last few streams that we've done to take us up to the book so far. So we are on page 109 of this version. So we're up to the second reading of the manuscript. So we've met William Race and his modern day element of the storyline, and we've just been also following the monk Louis Santiago for his element back in the 1500s in Peru. So yeah, we've got a lot of intrigue, a lot of mystery going on. The army's involved, DARPA's involved, all this crazy science, there's loads of scientists. So yeah, so they've just escaped. So literally the last couple of pages of the last reading was where the monk and the prince that he's helping and this convict that they picked up out of the prisons have escaped from the city walls of Cuzco, and they're now speeding off into the distance. So that's where we join back with the monk and Renko and Basario. We race through the night, Renko, Basario and myself spurring our horses on, making them gallop faster than they had ever done before. But behind us, close behind us, were the Spaniards. Hernando and his legion of mounted troops galloping across the countryside, hunting us like dogs. After departing through the northern gates of Cuzco Valley, we veered right, heading to the northeast. We came to the Uramba River, and the same river that had held Renko's prison hulk, and crossed it not far from the town of Pisac. And thus began our journey, our desperate escape through the wilderness. I will not trouble you, dear reader, with every trifling incident of our arduous journey, for it lasted for many days, and the incidents that took place during it were far too numerous. Rather, I shall mention only those occurrences which are pertinent to my grander tale. We were headed for a village named Vilcafort, so Renko informed me, of which his uncle was the chieftain. The village was to be found in the foothills of the great mountains far to the north, and the point where those mountains met, the great rainforest to the east. Apparently, Vilcafort was a secret citadel town, heavily fortified and well defended, that was maintained by the Incan nobility for use in times of crisis. The location was a carefully guarded secret, and it could be found only by following a series of stone totems placed at certain intervals in the rainforest, and then only when one knew the code to find the tone. And I'm obviously very tired tonight because I can't even read the sentences in the order that the words are written. Let's try that sentence again. Its location was a carefully guarded secret, and it could be found only by following a series of stone totems placed at certain intervals in the rainforest, and then only when one knew the code to find the totems. But to get to the rainforest, first we had to traverse the mountains. And so we entered the mountains, the stupendous rocky monoliths that dominate New Spain. It cannot be overstated just how magnificent the mountains of this country are. Their steep rocky bluffs and high pointed summits, capped with snow all year round, can be seen for hundreds of miles, even from the dense rainforests of the lowlands. After a few days of travel, we discarded our horses, preferring to navigate the delicate mountain trails on foot. Carefully, we walked along slippery, narrow paths cut into the side of steep mountain gorges. Gingerly, we crossed long, sagging rope bridges suspended high above raging mountain rivers. And all the while, echoing through the maze of narrow gorges behind us were the shouts and marching footsteps of the Spaniards. We came to several Incan villages, situated in the navels of the splendid mountain valleys. Each village was named after its chieftain, Rumac, Sipo, and Huanco. At these villages, we were supplied with food, guides, and llamas. The generosity of these people was incredible. It was as if every single villager knew of Renko and his mission, and they could not have moved faster to help us. When we had the time, Renko would show them the black stone idol, and they would all bow before it and fall silent, but we rarely had such time. The Spaniards pursued us doggedly. On one occasion, as we left the town of Ucuyu, a village situated at the base of the wide mountain valley, no sooner had we surmounted the crest of the nearest hill than I heard the reports of a heavy musket fire from behind us. I turned to gaze back down the valley. What I saw filled me with horror. I saw Hernando and his troops, a whole gigantic column of at least 100 men, marching on foot at the far end of the valley. Mounted troops flanked the enormous body of foot soldiers, riding ahead of them into the town that we'd only just left, firing their muskets at the unarmed Incas. Later, Hernando would drive his 100-man legion into three 30-man divisions. Then he staggered their marching times so that while one division marched, the other two rested. The rested divisions would then march later, overtaking the first group in their turn, and the cycle would continue. The result was a constantly moving mass of men, a mass that was always moving forward, always closing in on us. And all the while, Renko, Besario, and myself stumbled ever forward, struggling through the rocky wilderness, fighting fatigue every moment of the way. Of one thing I was certain, the Spaniards would catch us. The only question was when. Yet we still toiled on. Now at one point on our journey, and I must say, at a time when my countrymen were so close behind us that we could hear their voices echoing off the canyons to our rear, we stopped at a village named Colco, which is situated on the banks of a mountain river known as the Parcatambo. It was in this town I had obtained a clue as to why Renko had brought the criminal Besario along on our journey. For in the village of Colco there is a quarry. Now, as I have said before, these Indians are masterful stonemasons. All of their buildings are constructed of the most finely cut stones, some of which can be as tall as 6 men and weigh more than 100 tons. Such stones are harvested in the massive quarries of towns like Colco. After speaking quickly with the town's chieftain, Renko was escorted to the quarry, a monumental hole that had been dug into the side of a mountain. He returned a short while later with a goat skin sack in his hand. The sides of the sack bulged with sharp, rocky corners. Renko handed the sack to Besario and we rode on. I did not know what was in that sack, but on the nights when we stopped to rest, Besario would slink away to a corner of the camp and light his own fire. Then he would sit cross-legged and work over the sack with his back to Renko and myself. After 11 days of this most brutal travel, we emerged from the mountains and beheld a most momentous sight, a vista like none I have ever witnessed. We saw the rainforest spread out before us, a seamless carpet of green stretching out the distant horizon. The only breaks in the carpet were the tablelands, the wide, flat step-like formations in the landscape that marked the gradual transition from rugged mountain range to verdant river basin, and the wide bands of brown that snake their way through the dense jungle, the mighty rivers and the rainforest. Professor, have you ever heard of a man named... we plunged into the jungle. It was like hell on earth. For days we travelled through the eternal shade of the rainforest. It was wet and it was damp. Lord, how it was dangerous. Obscenely fat snakes hung from the trees. Small rodents scurried about under our feet, and on one night, I was certain of it, I saw the veiled outline of a panther, a shadow superimposed on the darkness, slinking silently stone on totem places across a nearby branch. Stone totems, placed at certain intervals in the rainforest, and then only when
And
one
then,
knew
of
the
course,
code to
there were
find
the
the
rivers,
totem,
in which there lurked the greatest danger of
I'm
all.
obviously very tired
Alligators.
because I can't even read the
Their
sentences
craggy,
in the
triangular
order that
heads
the
alone
words
were
are
enough
written.
to make a man's blood turn to ice, and their
Let's
bodies,
try
black
that
and heavy
sentence
and
again.
armoured, were at least 6 paces
Its
in length.
location was a carefully guarded secret.
Their eyes always
and it
watched
could be
us,
found
unblinking, reptilian, repulsive. We travelled down the rivers on reed canoes donated to us by the rivers villages of Paksu, Tupra and Roya. Boats which seemed pathetically small when compared to the inordinately large reptiles in the water
and it could
all
be
around
found
us.
only
And we climbed down the steep cliffs of the tablelands with the
its
aid of the
location
skilled Incan
guides.
guides.
I can't even read the sentences
In the
order
evenings,
that
by the light of the
words are
fire,
written.
Renko would instruct me in his language.
Let's
In
try that
return,
sentence
I would
again.
teach him the finer points of swordsmanship.
Its
with 2
location was a
glistening
carefully
Spanish
guarded
sabres
secret,
we had pilfered on
and
our
it
way
could be
out of
found
Cusco.
only
While Renko and I fenced, if he wasn't toiling away in some corner of the camp, Rosario would often practice his archery. Apparently, before he was imprisoned, for what I knew not, Rosario had been one of the finest archers in all of the Incan Empire. I believed it. One evening I saw him throw a rainforest fruit high into the air and pierce it with an arrow a moment later, such was his skill. After a time, however, it became apparent to us that the harsh terrain of the rainforest had slowed our pursuits somewhat. The sound of Fernando and his men hacking at the branches in the forest behind us grew progressively more faint. Indeed, at one time I thought that perhaps Hernando had given up on his pursuit. No, every day, runners from the various villages we passed through would catch us up and inform us of the sacking of their town. Hernando and his men were still coming. And so we toiled on, and then one day, not long after we'd left the village of Roya, at the time when I was walking at the head of our expedition, I pushed aside a large branch and found myself staring into the eyes of a snarling cat-like creature. I fell backwards with a shout, dropping with a loud splat in the mud. The next thing I heard was Bessario's chuckling softly. I looked up and saw I had revealed a large stone totem of some sort. The snarling cat I had seen was nothing but a stone carving of a great cat-like creature. But the carving was covered in a veil of trickling water, giving the unwary traveller, me, the impression that it was well and truly alive. As I looked at it more closely, however, I noticed that the stone carving on the totem was not dissimilar to that of the idol that was the cause of our frenetic journey. It was a jaguar of some kind, possessed of large feline fangs, snarling, no, roaring at the incautious explorer who happened to stumble upon it. I have wondered more than once at these Incans' fascination with the great cats. They idolize these creatures, treat them as gods. In fact, warriors who show feline coordination in their movements are most revered in their armies. It is seen as a great skill to be able to land on one's feet and pounce immediately back into the fray. Such a warrior is said to be possessed of the Jinga. Why, then, the very evening before I stumbled so embarrassingly upon the stone totem, Renko had been telling me that the most feared creature in their mythology is a great black cat known as the Titi in Agmara or the Rapper in Quechua. Apparently, this creature is as black as the night and almost as tall as a man, even when standing on all 4 legs, and it kills with unparalleled ferocity. Indeed, Renko said, it is that most feared variety of wild animal, the kind that kills for no other reason than for the pleasure of killing. Well done, brother Alberto, said Renko as I lay in the mud staring up at the totem. You've found the first of the totems that will lead us to Vilca 4. How will they lead us there? I inquired as I rose to my feet. Said Renko, there is a code known only to the most senior of Incan nobles. But if he tells you, he'll have to kill you, Bessario interjected with a rude grin. Renko smiled indulgently at Bessario. True, said he, but in the event that I should die, I shall need someone to continue my mission. And to do that someone will have to know the code to the totems. Renko turned to face me. I was hoping that you would be willing to bear that responsibility, Alberto. Me, said I, swallowing. Yes, you, said Renko. Alberto, I see the qualities of a hero in you, even if you do not. You possess honour and courage in far greater quantities than the average soul. I would have no hesitation in entrusting my people's fate to you should the worst befall me, if you should allow it. I bowed my head and nodded, acceding to his wish. Good, Renko smiled. You, on the other hand, he said, grinning wryly to Bessario, would give me considerable hesitation. Now go stand over there. Once Bessario had moved to stand some paces away from us, Renko leaned close to me and indicated the stone carving of the Rafa in front of us. Code is simple. Follow the Rafa's tail. Follow the Rafa's tail, said I, looking at the totem. Rafa is spelled R-A-P-A. So I want to say in my head Rafa, but then Rafa, R-A-P-A. I'm going to go with Rafa. Sure enough, out of the back of the carving extended a thin, snaking, feline tail pointing to the north. But Renko suddenly held up his finger. Not every totem is to be followed in this way. It is this rule that only the most senior nobles know. Indeed, I was only told of it by the high priestess when we arrived there to get the idol. And what is that rule then? I inquired. After the first totem, every second totem is to be distrusted. In those cases, one is to follow the totem in the direction of the mark of the sun. What's the mark of the sun? A mark not unlike this one, Renko said, indicating the small triangular birthmark below his left eye, the dark brown blemish of skin that looked like an inverted mountain. At every second totem after the first one, he said, we are not to follow the Rafa's tail, but rather go in the direction of the mark of the sun. What will happen if we continue to follow the Rafa's tail? Won't our enemies ultimately realise they are travelling in the wrong direction when they find no more totems? Renko smiled at me. Oh no, Alberto. There are more totems to be found, even if one goes in the wrong direction. But they only lead the bamboozled adventurer further and further away from the citadel. And so we followed the totems through the rainforest. They were spaced at varying intervals. Some were but a few hundred paces from the predecessors, others were some miles over land, so we had to be careful that we travelled in direct lines. Often we were aided by the river system, since at times the totems had been carefully placed along riverbanks. Following the totems, we travelled in a northerly direction, crossing the wide rainforest basin until we came to a new tableland that led up to the mountains. This tableland stretched from the north to the south for as far as the eye could see. A giant jungle-covered plateau, a single step that our Lord had built to aid him in stepping up from the rainforest to the mountain foothills. It was dotted with waterfalls all along its length. It was a truly magnificent sight. We climbed the tableland's cliff-like eastern face, hauling with us our reed canoes and paddles. It was then that we came to a final totem, which directed us upriver towards the gigantic snow-capped mountains that loomed above the rainforest. We rode against the gentle current of the river in the pouring afternoon rain. After a while, however, the rain stopped, and in the mist that followed the jungle took on an eerie quality. The world fell oddly silent, and strangely, the sounds of the rainforest abruptly vanished. No birds chirped, no rodents rustled in the underbrush. I felt a rush of dread flood through my body. Something was not right here. Renko and Bessario must have felt it too, for they paddled more slowly now, dipping their oars silently into the glassy surface of the water, as if not daring to break the unnatural silence. And then we rounded a bend in the river, and suddenly we saw a town on the riverbank. Nestled up against the base of the enormous mountain range, an imposing stone structure stood proudly in the centre of a cluster of small huts, while a wide moat-like ditch surrounded the entire enclave. the citadel of Vilca. And yes, I am absolutely the Bob Ross of books. Thank you very much, Goose. But none of us had much care for the great citadel, nor did we take much notice of the village around it that lay in smouldering ruins. No, we only had eyes for the bodies, the scores of bodies that lay crumpled on the main street of the town covered in blood. And now we're at a break in that reading. So we're going back to the present now. I'm a little flustered now because I was just getting so excited by what was going to happen in that bit. So this is what this book does to me. It's most annoying. Anyway, right. Monday, January the 4th, 1540 hours. Race turned the page, looking for the next chapter, but it wasn't there. This, it seemed, was the last page of the manuscript. Damn it, he thought. He peered out of the window of the Hercules and saw the engines mounted on the green painted wing outside. Saw the snow-capped peaks of the Andes gliding by beneath them. He looked over at Nash, sitting on the other side of the aisle, working on a laptop computer. Is this all there is? He asked. I'm sorry, Nash frowned. The manuscript, is this all we have? You mean you've finished translating it already? Uh-huh. Did you find the location of the idol? Well, kind of, Ray said, looking down at the notes he'd taken as he translated the manuscript. They read, leave Cuzco, enter mountains, villages, Ramak, Tipo, Huanco, Ocoyo, Polco, quarry there. 11 days, come to rainforest. River villages, Paxu, Tupra, Roya. Stone totems carved in shape of cat-like creature led to citadel to Vilca. Totem code, follow the Rapha's tail for the first totem. At every second totem after that, follow the mark of the sun. Follow totems north across the rainforest basin, came to tableland leading up to mountain foothills. At final totem, went up river towards mountains, found citadel in ruins. What do you mean you've kind of found it? Nash asked. Well, that's the thing, Ray said. The manuscript virtually ends in mid-sentence when they reach the town of Vilca. There's obviously more to be read, but it isn't here. He didn't add that he was beginning to find the story kind of interesting and wanted to read more of it. You're sure this is all we have? I'm afraid so, Nash said. Remember, this isn't the original manuscript, but rather a half-finished copy of it, transcribed by another monk many years after Santiago wrote the original. This is all there is. This is all that the other monk managed to copy from the original. He frowned. I was hoping we'd get the exact location of the idol from it, but if it doesn't give us that, then what I need to know are the generalities. Where to look, where to start looking. We've got the technology to pinpoint the location of the idol if we know where to begin our search. And by the sound of things, from what you've read so far, it appears you have enough there to tell me where to start looking. So tell me what you know. Race showed Nash's notes, told him the story of Renko Capac and his fight from Cuzco. He then explained that from what he'd read, Renko had made it his oh my word, I am struggling. He then explained that from what he'd read, Renko had made it to his intended destination, a citadel town at the base of the Andes known as Vilca. He also told Nash that so long as they knew one particular fact, the manuscript detailed how to get to that town. And what fact is that? Nash said. Assuming the stone totems are still there, Ray said, you have to know what the mark of the sun is. If you don't know what it is, then you can't read the totems. Nash frowned and turned to Walter Chambers, the anthropologist and Incan expert, sitting a few seats away. Walter, do you know anything about a mark of the sun in Incan culture? The mark of the sun? Why, yes, of course, he said. What is it? Chambers shrugged, came over. It's just a birthmark, really, kind of like Professor Race's there. He nodded with his chin at Race's glasses, indicating the dark triangular blemish on his skin under his left eye. Race cringed. Ever since he was a kid, he'd hated that birthmark. He thought it looked like a smudged coffee stain on his face. The Incans thought birthmarks were sign of distinction, Chambers said. Signs sent from the gods themselves. The mark of the sun was a special kind of birthmark. It's not a poo stain. Why would anyone even write that? Well, I hope it's not anyway, because that would just be 30. Blah. Signs sent from the gods themselves. The mark of the sun was a special kind of birthmark, a blemish on the face, just below the left eye. It was special because the Incans believed that it was a mark sent from the most powerful god, the sun god. To have a child with such a mark was regarded as a great honour. The mark of the sun indicated that that particular child was special, in some way destined for greatness. They said, so if someone instructed us to follow a statue in the direction of the mark of the sun, they would be telling us to go to the statue's left. That would be correct, Chambers said, hesitating, I think. What do you mean, you think? Nash said. Well, you see, over the past 10 years, there's been substantial debate among anthropologists as to whether or not the mark of the sun was found on the left-hand side of the face or the right-hand side of the face. Incan carvings and pictographs usually depict the mark of the sun, whether on pictures of humans or animals or whatever, under the carving's left eye. Problems arise, however, when one reads Spanish texts, like Reliquion and the royal commentaries, which talk of people like Renko Capac Amaru, both of whom were said to have borne the mark. Problem is, the books say that Renko and Amaru had the mark under their right eyes, and as soon as something like that arises, confusion reigns supreme. What do you think? Left-hand side, definitely. And we should be able to find our way to the citadel, Nash said, worried. You can trust my judgment on this, Colonel, Chambers said confidently. If we follow each statue to the left, we'll find that citadel. Just then, a sing-song little bell rang from somewhere nearby. Race turned. It had come from Nash's laptop. An email message must have come through. Nash went back to his seat to get it. Chambers turned to Race. It's all very exciting, isn't it? Exciting isn't exactly the word I'd use, Race said. He was just glad that he'd finished translating the manuscript before they'd landed in Cuzco. If Nash was going to venture into the jungle after the idol, he didn't want to be part of it. He glanced at his watch. It was 4:35 p.m. It was getting late. Just then, Nash appeared next to him. Professor, he said, if you're up to it, I'd like you to come along with us to Vilca 4. There was something in his tone that made Race pause. This was a command and not a question. I thought you said if I translated the manuscript before we landed, I wouldn't even have to get off the plane. I said that might be the case. You'll recall that I also said if you did have to leave the plane, you'd have a team of Green Berets looking after you. That is the circumstance now. Why? Race asked. I've arranged for a pair of helicopters to meet us at Cuzco. We'll be using them to follow Santiago's trail from the air. Unfortunately, I thought the manuscript would be more detailed in its destination of the location of the idol, more precise. But now we're going to need you for the trip to Vilca 4 in case there are any ambiguities between the text and the terrain. Race didn't sound like the sound of this. He felt he had fulfilled his part of the deal, and the idea of going into the Amazon rainforest made him decidedly uneasy. On top of that, the tone of Nash's request made him even more apprehensive. He got the feeling that now Nash had him on board the Hercules and bound for Cuzco. His options and his ability to say no were extremely limited. He felt trapped, railroaded into going somewhere he didn't want to go. This wasn't part of the deal at all. Couldn't I just stay in Cuzco, he offered lamely, keep in contact with you from there? No, Nash said, definitely not. We're arriving through Cuzco, but we won't be leaving that way. This plane and all the US Army personnel waiting for us in Cuzco will be leaving the city shortly after we head off into the jungle in the choppers. I'm sorry, Professor, but I need you. I need you to help me get me to Vilca 4. Race bit his lip. Christ. Well, all right, he said reluctantly. Good, Nash said, standing. Very good. Now, did I hear you say earlier you had some less formal clothes in that bag of yours? Yes. Well, I suggest you get changed into them. You're going into the jungle now. Oh my gosh. Hurry, everyone. I am on a sleepy train tonight. The Hercules flew over the mountains. Race emerged from the lavatory in the plane lower cargo deck, now dressed in a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and a pair of black sneakers. The clothes he'd packed for his lunchtime baseball game. He was also wearing a battered navy blue New York Yankees baseball cap. He saw the Green Berets on the deck in front of him, preparing and cleaning their weapons for the mission ahead. One of the commandos, a red-headed older corporal named Jake Buzz Cochran, was talking animatedly as he cleaned his firing mechanism of his M16. I tell you boys, it was fucking apples, he was saying. Apples. Sweet 16 with cheap Doreen. Gentlemen, mark my words, she is without a doubt the most bang for your buck whore in all of South Carolina. At that moment, Cochrane caught sight of Ray standing, listening at the lavatory door, and he cut himself off. All of the other Green Berets spun around and Race felt instantly self-conscious. Felt like an outsider, someone who wasn't part of the Brotherhood, someone who didn't belong. He saw his bodyguard, the tall Sergeant Van Leeuwen, hovering at the perimeter of the circle, and he smiled. Hey. Van Leeuwen smiled back. How's it going? Good, really good, Race said lamely. He walked past the now silent band of rugged Green Berets, reached the steep flight of steps that led back up to the main passenger deck. As he climbed the stairs, however, he heard Green Beret named Cochrane mutter something from the cargo bay. He knew he wasn't supposed to have heard it anyway. Cochrane had said, "Fucking pansy." A voice came over the PA system as Race walked back down the centre aisle of the passenger compartment. Commencing our descent now, ETA Cuzco, 20 minutes. On his way to his seat, Race passed Walter Chambers, the bespectacled little scientist who was holding Race's notes alongside another sheet of paper. It was a map of some sort, marked with a felt-tip pen. Chambers looked up at Race. Professor, just the man I was looking for. A point of clarification. These notes here, Paksu, Tupra and Roya, he pointed to Race's notes. These are in order, aren't they? I mean, the order Renko visited them. They're in the same order as they appear in the manuscript. Okay, good. Hey, Walter, Ray said, sitting down next to Chambers. There was something I was hoping I could ask you. Yes. In the manuscript, Renko mentioned a creature called the Titi, or the Rafa. What exactly is that? The Rafa, Chambers nodded. Yes, it's not really my field, but I do know a little bit about it. Like many other South American cultures, the Incans had an unusual fascination with great cats. They built statues to them, both large and small, and sometimes they carved huge bas-reliefs of them into entire mountain rock faces. Why, the city of Cuzco was even built in the shape of a puma. The fascination with the great cats, however, is really quite a strange phenomenon. Since South America is known for its lack of great cats, the only large cats indigenous to the continent are the jaguar, or panther, and the puma, which are actually only medium-sized felines. They're not even close in size to the tiger, which is the largest of all the great cats. Chambers shifted in his seat. The Rafa, however, is another story altogether. It's more like the South American version of Bigfoot or Loch Ness. It's a legendary creature, a great big black cat. As with Bigfoot and Nessie, you hear sightings every couple of years. Farmers in Brazil complain about cattle mutilations, tourists on the Inca Trail in Peru claim to see big cats running around at night, and occasionally local men are found brutally killed in the lowlands of Colombia, but no one ever gets proof. There are a couple of photos, but they've all been discredited, just blurry, out of focus shots that could be anything It could be anything from an ordinary old panther to a spectacled bear. So it's a myth, Ray said, a giant cat myth. Don't dismiss giant cat myths so quickly, Professor Race, Chambers said. They're quite common throughout the world. India, South Africa, Siberia. Why, it might surprise you to learn the most vehement beliefs in giant cat myths come from England. England? Ray said. The beast of Exmoor, the beast of Barn, giant cats that prowl the moors late at night, never caught, never photographed, but their prints are often found in the mud. Goodness, if the sightings are true, chances are Hound of the Baskervilles was not a dog, but actually a giant cat. Ray snuffed a laugh at the end of that, and left Chambers to his work. He returned to his seat. No sooner had he sat down, however, than he felt someone sit next to him. It was Lauren. The lucky cap, she said, looking at Race's battered blue Yankees cap. I don't know if I told you this, but I always hated that damn cap. You told me, Race said, but you still wore it. It's a good cap. Lauren's eyes wandered appraisingly over his t-shirt, jeans and Nikes. Race noticed that she was dressed in a thick khaki shirt rolled up at her sleeves, khaki trousers and a sturdy pair of hiking boots. Nice outfit, she said before he could say exactly the same thing. What can I say, he replied. When I packed for work today, I wasn't expecting to go into the jungle. Lauren threw her head back and laughed. It was the same laugh Race remembered from the old days, totally theatrical and utterly dubious sincerity. And of utterly dubious sincerity. I forgot how dry you were, she said. Bryce smiled weakly, bowed his head. How have you been, Will? She asked. Good, he lied. And you? You're obviously done well for yourself. I mean, geez, Darper. Life is good, she said. Life is very good. Listen, Will. And there it was, the transition. Lauren had always been good at getting down to business. I just wanted to talk with you before we landed. I just wanted to say that I don't want what happened between us to get in the way of what we're doing here. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't hurt me, Ray said, perhaps a little too quickly. He looked down at his shoelaces. Well, nothing that didn't mend for a while. After a while. That's not exactly true. It had taken him a lot more than a while to get over Lauren O'Connor. Their relationship had been a classic sort of affair, the all-American college mismatch. Race was smart but had no money. Lauren was brilliant and her family had money to burn. Race went to USC on a half-sport scholarship. In return for playing football for them, they paid half his tuition. He scraped together the other half by working nights behind the bar at a local nightclub. Lauren's parents had paid all her fees in full, in one upfront payment. They were together for 2 years, a footballer with the decent but not spectacular grades in languages, and the tall, beautiful science major who was acing everything. Race had loved it. Lauren was all he'd ever wanted in a companion. Intelligent, outgoing, acidly funny. At football parties, she'd stand out like the sun on a cloudy day, and when she'd search the room for him and find him and smile, he'd melt. He fell in love with her. And then Lauren won a scholarship to study at MIT for a year, doing theoretical physics or something like that. She went, he waited. Now it was a classic long-distance relationship, love over the phone. Race was faithful. He lived for their weekly phone call. And then she came back. He was at the airport waiting for her. He had the ring in his pocket. He'd practiced the speech 1,000 times, got it just right so that he'd drop to one knee at precisely the right moment and ask her. But when she came through the arrivals gate that day, she already had a diamond ring on her finger. Well, I'm sorry, she said, but, well, I've met someone else. Grace never even got the ring out of his pocket, and so he spent the rest of his time in college nose down in books, resolutely single and unimaginably miserable. He graduated 4th in his class in ancient languages and, to his complete surprise, got an offer to teach at NYU. With nothing else he wanted to do, except maybe slashing his wrists, he took it. And now he was humble language professor working out of an old clapboard office in New York City, while she was a theoretical physicist working in the cutting edge of the United States military most high-esteemed technology weapon department. Race had never expected to see her again, nor he thought, did he want to. But then, when Frank Nash had mentioned her name that morning, something inside him had clicked. He'd wanted to see what she'd made of herself, and, well, now he'd seen what he saw was clear. She'd made a hell of a lot more out of herself than he had. Race blinked, snapped out of it. He came back to the present and found he was staring at her wedding ring. Jesus, get a grip, he thought. Frank said you did a Good job with the manuscript, Lauren said. Grace coughed, clearing his throat as well as his mind. As much as I do, I mean, hey, it isn't theoretical physics, but it's what I do. You should be proud of what you do, she said, and then she smiled at him. It's good to see you again, Will. Grace smiled back as best he could. Then she stood and looked about herself. Well, anyway, I'd better be getting back. Looks like we're about to land. So, they've just arrived in Cuzco, or they're just arriving in Cuzco, and honestly, I'm sending myself to sleep reading tonight, guys. So, I think I'm going to have to call it a night there. I hope you've enjoyed this last little bit of it. And the next one on Sunday, we'll try and get back to sort of a little bit of a longer read, and get an extra couple of chapters out next time. And hopefully I'll be more awake for that one. But yeah, if you've got any feedback, anything, any thoughts or anything on the characters, where it's going, where the story's going, then just write a little message in. That'd be really great to hear from you. But for now, good night, and I will see you on Sunday about the same time, between 9 and 10.